Michael remained silent for a moment after Arvin finished speaking. Then he nodded. I understand. After a brief pause, Michael spoke again. Then, is it okay for me to leave the academy grounds now? That drew all 5 of their attention back to him. Michael scratched his cheek lightly. I want to go home for a bit. To see my family. One of the elders spoke first. Family, huh? Another gave a small nod. That's fine. The quiet elder added calmly. In fact, it's probably better if you leave sooner rather than later. Michael looked at him. The elder continued. The longer you stay after awakening, the harder it becomes to move without attention. There are students and teachers here, us included, that the moment we step outside this place, multiple groups are already aware of our movements. You probably had attention on you before, but it is different now. A rank 3 19-year-old awakener with your prospects is a very different matter from a rank 2 one. Michael understood immediately. Director Lin spoke next. You've already drawn enough attention as it is. If you do go outside, try not to add more to it. Michael nodded. Got it. One of the elders added, almost as an afterthought. And don't stay away too long. Michael paused. Why? He had several guesses already forming, but the question came out instinctively before he could stop it. Arvin answered. The academy has things for you to do. Michael's brows furrowed slightly. Arvin smiled faintly. You didn't think reaching rank 3 would make you less busy, did you? Another elder snorted. If anything, it makes you more useful. Michael was not surprised by that. Perhaps only during the first year could a student remain within the academy, quietly focusing on studying and leveling up. But from the second year onward, even if one had no intention of going out to seek resources, the academy itself would not allow such passivity. Those who failed to prove their usefulness would eventually be removed if they could not be ignored. That was simply how things worked. With his current strength, Michael would have been far more surprised if they allowed him to continue living like an ordinary first-year student. He let out a small breath. I see. Michael did not react much to being assigned to a mission. It was fair. Nothing in this world came without a cost. The knowledge he had accumulated, which had contributed so significantly to his overall growth, would not have been possible without the academy behind him. Arvin continued calmly. You are no longer at a stage where you can grow slowly in isolation. Your foundation is already set and any growth now could take years. What you need now is refinement. Michael nodded slowly. Then can I know what the academy has planned for me? That drew a brief exchange of glances between the 5 of them. Arvin was the one who answered. That should be fine. He paused briefly. When you were unconscious, we made a decision regarding your next stage of development. You will be assigned to an external mission. Michael's brows drew together slightly. External. He could guess what that meant, but something about the way Arvin said it made him ask anyway. What exactly does that mean? Arvin looked at him directly. It means outside Aurora. Michael stilled. Outside. As in another realm. Arvin gave a small nod. For years now, the Federation has been working to establish stronger ties with other realms. Another elder added, power is not only measured by individual strength. Alliances matter. Arvin continued smoothly, and earlier this year a decision was made. To move beyond simple contact. An exchange. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. Exchange. For a set period of time, Aurora and several cooperating realms will exchange individuals. The exact classification depends on the situation. Michael understood immediately. So I'll be sent there? Possibly. Yes. A brief silence followed before Arvin added, you won't be the only one. But your situation is somewhat unique. Unique how? Sending you out serves 2 purposes. Arvin raised a finger. First, experience. A second finger followed. Second, distance. You've drawn too much attention recently. If you leave Aurora, your presence becomes obscured. Michael understood. So it's also a way to let things cool down. Arvin inclined his head slightly. Exactly. By the time you return, the initial surge of attention will have settled. Or at the very least, become more manageable. Michael let out a slow breath. That made sense. He was quiet for a moment longer, then asked, "Do you already know which realm I'll be going to?" That drew another brief exchange of glances between the five. One of the elders answered first. "Not yet. You don't need to worry about that part. We'll make sure the choice is a relatively safe one for you." Michael's brows lifted slightly. "Relatively?" Arvin smiled faintly. "You're going outside Aurora, not to a vacation. Estate." That was fair. Michael accepted it with a nod. To be honest, if he was still too afraid to take that kind of step now, after everything he had survived and with everything he currently possessed, then there might come a point in the future where even his talent would not be enough to carry him forward. "All right," he said at last. One of the elders seemed faintly satisfied by that response. "Good." Then another spoke. "Since you'll likely be leaving Aurora for a while, you should take this chance to move your family closer to the academy." Michael blinked. The elder continued. "If your heart is unsettled, your mind won't be, either. It's better to place them somewhere closer to protection and closer to you." Director Lin nodded once. "That would be wise," Arvin added. "If you're going to be away, knowing they're near the academy would make many things easier for you." Michael's expression shifted. That had already been part of his plan for going home. Hearing them say it directly only made him more certain. "I was already thinking about that," he admitted. One of the elders gave a small nod. "Then do it. Don't wait too long. Once the assignment is settled, your time may not fully belong to you." "Yes, sir." Now Michael only wanted to go home. If he could settle his family somewhere safer before leaving, one of the biggest weights on his mind would ease considerably. "Then I'll head home, settle things there, and return as quickly as I can." Director Lin replied as she looked at him. "See that you do, and try not to cause too much trouble on the way." "I'll be careful." "Good." Meanwhile in Brightgate City, two teenagers could be seen in a room about to enter what looked like a pair of game pods. "What game are we playing today?" Lily asked as Jester settled into his pod and reached for the cover. Jester didn't pause at the question. "Whatever the stream decides," he said. Thanks to looking almost exactly like Michael at the peak of his popularity in Aurora. Except younger, Jester had managed to gather a significant following after being caught live on other streamers' broadcasts. Lily was not left out, though her following, while real, hadn't grown to the same scale as his. Jester closed the lid of the pod. The world went dark for a fraction of a second. Then light returned. Familiar interface spread out before him as his consciousness settled into the game space. A vast digital horizon stretching endlessly in all directions. Beside him, Lily appeared moments later, her form stabilizing with a faint shimmer. "Still feels weird," she muttered, flexing her fingers as if testing whether they were real. Jester rolled his shoulders once, already accustomed. "You'll get used to it. Your senses are just too sensitive from your training." Without wasting time, he flicked his hand. A translucent panel opened. In front of him, stream interface. Status. Offline. Viewers, 0. He tapped it. "Let's start." Stream status. Live. For a split second nothing happened. Then the number jumped. 10, 53, 120, 500. Kept climbing. Within seconds the viewer count surged past 1,000, then 5, then 10. Jester watched it calmly as it continued to rise until it stabilized somewhere above 20,000. It was the weekend. Peak hours. Not surprising. A faint smile formed on his lips. "Hey!" His voice carried easily through the stream. "Miss me?" The chat exploded instantly. "He's live. Jester, let's go." "I knew it. Why are you so handsome?" "Marry me please." "Where's Lily?" "Lily best girl." "Stream started just now?" Bro came out of nowhere again. "I skipped lunch for this. Messages flooded in so quickly they became a blur." Jester leaned back slightly, clearly used to it. "Relax. One at a time." That only made it worse. He spoke. "Say my name." "I love you." "Pick a game please, let chat decide." He said, "Relax, OMG. I'm not relaxing." Lily appeared beside him on screen a moment later, looking around at the scrolling chaos with a blank expression. "Why are they like this every time?" Jester glanced at her. "They're excited." "That's not excitement," Lily said flatly. "That's a problem." The chat immediately shifted. Lily. Lily is here. Queen. She's so pretty. Step on me. Lily, notice me. Lily's expression did not change. "I regret coming." Jester chuckled. "You say that every time." Jester raised a hand slightly. All right. Calm down." That did absolutely nothing. If anything, the chat sped up. He sighed lightly, then added, "You people should relax. My sister and I are only 16. A pause. Then he leaned forward slightly, voice turning half serious and half amused. "If you keep going like this, I might have to report you all to the authorities for harassment." For a brief second, there was a strange lull. Then the chat exploded harder than before. "Only 16? Even better. Same age BTW. It's fair game. Don't threaten me with a good time. Report me, please. I can explain." "Wait, no, I can't. Free me, I did nothing." Lily slowly turned her head toward Jester. "You made it worse." Jester stared at the flood of messages for a second, then sighed. "Yeah, I can see that." The chat kept going. "Bro, look what you did." He said, "Authorities, LMAO. Call them. I'll turn myself in. This stream is dangerous. Lily, save US." Then the tone shifted. "NGL being 16 makes me nervous." "Same. I've been thinking about awakening for years. What if I fail? I always imagined it, but what if it doesn't happen?" Jester's eyes flickered slightly as he glanced at Lily. She was 16. He couldn't help but wonder quietly whether the cousin of his master would awaken a class in this lifetime. He turned back to the chat panel. "Don't worry too much, awakening is rare anyway, most people don't awaken. Focus on cultivation instead. Yeah, awakening isn't everything. Easy for you to say I'm 18 this year, if I fail this time it's over for me. No fourth chance and my cultivation talent is trash, I don't even know what I'll do after." For a brief moment, the chaotic energy of the stream dipped. "You guys think too far ahead," Jester said. The chat paused. "Yeah, awakening matters," he continued. "But it's not the only path. If you want power, succeeding at cultivation is perfectly valid. More people walk that road than you think." A few messages appeared. "Easy for you to say you'll have an awakener big brother. I wonder what he's doing now. Are all awakeners that busy? Lily, is it true that you're about to become an official cultivator? Not only him but other popular ones from the exams are nowhere to be seen lately." Meanwhile, as the stream slowly found its rhythm, hundreds of meters away from Michael's house, two figures stood concealed within the first layer of the void. From that position, the house below was clear enough to observe but distant enough to avoid immediate notice. Neither of them extended their senses too deeply. That would have been reckless. At the level of people currently present around that house, probing too far into another's territory was one of the fastest ways to draw attention. Even with restraint, they could feel enough. 20 at least, one of them muttered. Their strengths varied, but none were below rank 2. "Just as we suspected," the other said, keeping his gaze on the house. "This place is heavily guarded. How many do you think are from the Federation and how many from the Academy?" The other considered it briefly. "A good number of the lower-ranked ones should be from the Federation. The higher-ranked presences, I'd say most of those are from the Academy." The first did not disagree. That had been his read as well. For a few seconds both fell silent, simply observing. Then, almost at the same time, the corners of their mouths lifted. "Soon it won't matter," the first said. The other smiled. "Of course." His gaze sharpened slightly. Did the Federation truly think that by slowly revealing the supernatural world to Aurora's common people they could hide us forever while also painting our image black? A faint scoff followed. His smile widened. "Since the covers are coming down anyway, we too will step forward." The first figure's eyes glinted faintly in the void. "It is time for a golden age." a time where supernaturals are treated as what they truly are, and push this civilization toward what it truly deserves. It's funny, the second said after a moment, amusement touching his voice. The Federation calls us fragmented, unstable, impossible to unite. He looked down toward the city below. And yet they are the ones who cannot truly move as one. That was the irony. The Federation was powerful, overwhelmingly so in some ways. But for all its strength, it was also burdened by too many interests, too many factions, too many hands pulling in different directions. By contrast, demonic supernaturals understood one another far more easily than the Federation ever seemed to understand itself. Which was almost humorous, given what people believed about their nature, beliefs that also happened to be accurate in several ways. The first figure let out a quiet chuckle. They call us monsters, yet we are more honest about what we are. The other nodded. Their attention remained on Michael's house for a few more seconds before the second figure spoke again. Are we really going to kidnap ordinary people? The question hung in the void. To them there was no contempt in it, only a faint confusion. Ordinary family members. In their eyes, such people could hardly be counted as a true weakness. The first raised his shoulders lightly. If orders were given, then we do it. His answer was simple and uncomplicated. The other frowned slightly. It still feels pointless. Maybe. The first did not argue. But pointless or not, it costs us nothing. His gaze shifted downward again toward the house below. In the middle of chaos, when our underlings finish their preparations, taking a few ordinary people away should not be difficult. The second thought about it for a moment. That part was true. His expression gradually smoothed. And if it works, the youth might become easier to influence. The first gave a faint nod. Or easier to draw out. A brief silence followed. Then the second asked, "Do you think he'll break over ordinary people?" The first was quiet for a moment. Whether he breaks or not doesn't matter. He continued in the same calm tone. A genius is still only dangerous when allowed to grow properly. Disturb the rhythm early enough, and even a monster can be led. The second figure looked down toward the streets beyond the house. Their preparations are taking a while. They're being careful, as they should. A faint trace of amusement entered his voice. It's quite funny, honestly, to think one of the summoning circles we laid down randomly years ago in a developing city will finally become important enough to rival the major ones we planned deliberately. And if I'm not mistaken, this youth has some history with it as well. He paused, then laughed. We might actually be fated. After Michael left the academy grounds and returned to the surface world, he did not rush straight home. He missed his family. That much was true. After being away for so long, the desire to see them was real. But that was exactly why he couldn't return empty-handed. At the very least, he had to bring gifts. This city was very different from the one where his family lived. It was richer, more advanced, and far more exposed to the larger currents of the world. Even before the Federation had decided to become more open about the supernatural, some cities had never truly been in the dark. This was one of them. Michael took his time. For his aunt, he chose foreign spices. Aunt Mia was not a chef only because it paid the bills. She genuinely loved cooking. Michael still remembered the way her face would light up whenever she made a new dish, though at the learning stage most of them had ended up as something that could generously be described as inedible. This city happened to have entire sections of the market devoted to imported ingredients from other states and beyond. It was impossible not to think of her the moment he saw them. He bought more than he initially intended. For Lily, he was less certain. He eventually settled on what he believed a 16-year-old girl might appreciate, with a reasonable degree of uncertainty. A few accessories. Some sweets that were slightly fancier than what was usually sold back home. A pair of soft wristbands that shifted color based on pulse rate. He was not fully convinced by the choice, but they looked harmless, and more importantly, they looked like something a younger girl might actually enjoy. Everything went neatly into his storage space. Michael was about to leave when something caught his eye. Pet shop. At first glance it looked ordinary enough, but this was not a normal pet shop. It sold mechanical pets. Michael stood still for a moment, looking through the glass. Inside, sleek metallic creatures moved with an eerie smoothness. A silver cat with gem-like eyes leapt onto a perch and curled up as if it were flesh and blood. Mechanical pets? He had heard of them before. He had even seen one on his first day in this city and several more on the academy grounds. There were generally two major types. The first kind was closer to extremely advanced artificial intelligence. Machines built with such intricate behavioral patterns and sensory responses that they could pass for normal animals. They were trained extensively, given additional functions, and designed to imitate real creatures with frightening precision. Only their extra features and chosen appearance would expose them. The second kind went beyond that. Those were not simply machines mixed with programs. They were machines mixed with magic. Their intelligence was not merely code but something closer to a bound soul structure, carefully written and refined until it behaved like a genuine creature while retaining capabilities beyond what ordinary animals could offer. Real in a meaningful sense because they had something resembling a soul. Because of their existence, classes had formed around them. Just like how someone could eventually gain a dragon tamer class after fulfilling specific conditions with dragons, the same could happen with mechanical beasts. 3 days ago it was like this too. I didn't record it last time. This time I'm not missing it. Wait, zoom in. Zoom in. Excitement. Curiosity. A faint thread of unease beneath both. But not panic. Michael remained still, looking up. Something about the scene felt familiar. Very familiar. A memory surfaced. Woodstone City. The same strange atmosphere. The same crowd reaction. People stopping, pointing, recording, not understanding what they were looking at. Not until it was too late. Michael's expression shifted slightly. Then he shook his head once. This wasn't Woodstone City. This was a core city. A place under direct academy oversight, filled with high-ranking supernaturals and layered defenses both visible and hidden. Demonic supernaturals would have to be insane to launch an attack here, right? His eyes stayed on the sky. The darkness spread a little further. Too fast. Too deliberate. The air itself seemed to grow heavier, as if something unseen was pressing down on the city from above. Around him the mood had not fully shifted yet. People were still recording, still talking, still treating it as something interesting, but a few had gone quiet. Michael's instincts stirred. His hand lowered slightly to his side, fingers twitching faintly. Something's wrong. Michael didn't know what was happening, but he had a bad feeling about it. He stood there a few seconds longer, watching the darkness continue to spread. Then he exhaled slowly. Doesn't matter. Whatever was about to happen, it wasn't going to stop him from going home. After months of dealing with supernatural matters without rest, his family came first. And more importantly, this was not some weak, unguarded city. Aside from the nearby academy, there were at least 2 other major posts of equivalent standing. If something really did happen here, they would handle it. Michael's eyes lingered on the sky for one last moment. Then he moved. His figure blurred, and the next instant he was gone. Michael reappeared several streets away, his footing steady the moment his body stabilized. That felt different, Michael muttered, a hint of excitement flickering in his eyes. This was the first time he had used teleportation through the void without entering wisdom state. Michael flexed his fingers slightly, feeling the residual traces of space distortion fade from his body. So this is what it's like. There was a quiet satisfaction in his chest. In fairness, this was only possible because of wisdom. Without that foundation, without that understanding of space and perception, achieving something like this, so cleanly right after advancing, would have been out of reach. He didn't waste time. His figure blurred again as he appeared outside the city, suspended in midair. Michael gave the city and its darkening sky one last look, then prepared to teleport again. His body froze before he could. Across the sky, cracks began to appear. They spread slowly, like wounds being carved into the air itself, thin dark lines branching outward before widening bit by bit. The sight alone sent a visible ripple through everyone watching. The earlier curiosity broke instantly. Some of those still recording lowered their devices in shock. Others raised them higher instead. In other places, murmurs collapsed into shouts. What is that? The sky is breaking. No, that's not normal. That's not normal at all. Michael stared upward. Shock passed through him. The familiarity of the scene struck him all at once, hard enough to make his jaw clench. He had known it felt familiar. He had suspected it from the moment the color of the sky changed. And now, watching the cracks widen, he understood why. Michael's teeth pressed together. Demonic supernaturals. The words came out low and full of rage. And right behind the anger came something colder. This city had millions of people, and based on the mana already gathering in the cracks above, Michael could tell this would not unfold the same way Woodstone had. Back then, weaker creatures had come through first. Enough to spread terror, but not enough to bury the city in blood before its defenders could respond. This felt different. The mana in the cracks was too dense. His eyes narrowed sharply. Are they scaling their evil in relation to their target's strength? The thought made his expression colder. Was that the logic behind it? Weaker cities received weaker attacks. Stronger cities received proportionally stronger ones. The more powerful the target, the more vicious the opening strike? The idea was insane. And yet, looking at what was forming above the city, it felt entirely plausible. Below, panic had finally taken hold. The earlier excitement was completely gone. People moved in every direction, some running without any clear destination, some calling out names, some frozen in place and still staring upward. At that moment, Michael still thought of his family. Last time, when demonic supernaturals did this, it wasn't limited to a single location. Regardless, this city had its own protectors and plenty of them. Suddenly, every second he spent standing here felt like a second wasted. Though leaving like this made him feel a trace of guilt when he saw a few supernaturals rising to meet the threat in the air, the feeling quickly faded. Michael's figure blurred, and space folded. This time he crossed a far greater distance. Far behind him, the cracks in the sky continued to widen. Meanwhile, far away from the city and completely unaware of what was unfolding above Brightgate, Jester and Lily were still inside the virtual space. The raid had only just begun to settle into rhythm. The earlier storm of messages had calmed somewhat, replaced by a mix of casual chatter, game suggestions, and the occasional anxious comment about awakening. Jester had just finished responding to one when a new message appeared. Wait, why is it getting dark outside? Neither of them paid much attention at first. Then another came. Same here. My window literally just got darker. Is it about to rain? No, the sky looks weird. Jester's eyes flickered toward the chat. Lily noticed too. Weird weather. The messages multiplied. Hold on, I'm checking. No, this isn't normal. Sky looks wrong. Why is it so dark all of a sudden? Wait, are you guys seeing this too? Jester's expression shifted slightly. The chat was moving faster again. But the energy behind it was different from before. It was something closer to confusion edging toward unease. Some people started posting half-formed descriptions. Others left the stream entirely to check their surroundings. The viewer count in the corner began to drop. 20,341. 19,880. 19,102. 18,400. Jester frowned. Even when something distracted the audience, the drop was usually gradual. This felt different, abrupt, like people were leaving all at once rather than drifting away. Lily's eyes narrowed. That's not normal. Jester said nothing, but he nodded slightly. More messages came through. The internet is acting weird. My screen lagged. Anyone else? Signal drop? What is that in the sky? Then the stream froze. Not for the viewers. For him. The interface in front of Jester flickered once, twice, then dimmed. Connection unstable. Attempting reconnection. The viewer count dropped harder. 12,000. 8,000. 3,000. Then 0. The entire panel blinked red. Network lost. Switching to offline mode. Network lost. Switching to offline mode. The stream died. The world around them remained intact, but the system had cut off all external interaction. Jester and Lily looked at each other in confusion. Jester dismissed the dead panel with a flick of his hand. "We're leaving." Lily didn't argue. Jester's gaze swept across the virtual environment one last time. Then he said quietly, "Log out." The digital world dissolved almost immediately. The first thing Jester did the moment he stepped out of the game pod was look toward the window. Even before that, he already knew something was wrong. The mana in the air had changed. Not by a small amount either. It was noticeably denser than before. And worse, it smelled wrong. Dirty. Corrupted. Jester was not uncomfortable with that quality in itself. His nature made sure of that. But that was exactly why the change stood out so clearly to him. This kind of thick corruption had not been present before he went in, which meant something had shifted while they were under. As expected, the sky outside had darkened considerably. Lily stepped out of her pod a second later, still adjusting to the transition from virtual immersion back to reality. The moment her eyes reached the window, she paused. Her confusion sharpened quickly. A faint trace of suspicion crossed her face. "Jester," she said slowly. "What is happening?" Jester did not answer immediately. His eyes stayed on the window. Then, without turning, he said, "If you can't already tell that the mana density out there is significantly higher than normal, I'm starting to question whether advancing soon is actually the right call for you." Lily stiffened. Embarrassment flashed across her face immediately. "I noticed," she muttered. Jester glanced at her briefly. He knew she hadn't, but he didn't press it. His point had already served its purpose. If she had any self-awareness left, she would understand. His gaze returned to the sky. Then both of them saw it. A crack. High above, thin and dark against the sky, spreading slowly like a wound. Jester's eyes narrowed slightly. His first reaction was not fear. That was something he couldn't feel. It was closer to intrigue, a genuine curiosity about what exactly was unfolding. Lily's reaction was the complete opposite. The moment the crack widened just a fraction more, all color left her face. Her pupils shrank. Then she screamed. The sound was sharp and immediate. Her legs gave out beneath her and she hit the floor hard. Jester turned in genuine surprise. "Lily!" She was trembling violently. Not a slight tremor from shock or unease. It was raw, instinctive fear. Her eyes were fixed on the crack in the sky, but she was clearly not seeing the present. Jester crouched beside her quickly. "Lily!" No response. He reached for her shoulder. She flinched so hard it looked like she had been struck. Her breathing had turned ragged, and her whole frame shook without stopping. Jester's expression hardened. Whatever had produced this reaction in Lily was not something small. He reached out and placed a hand lightly against her chin, turning her face upward until her eyes met his. A faint stillness spread through Lily's body. Jester's voice became slower. "Calm down." Lily's trembling lessened slightly. He kept his gaze locked onto hers. "Do not fear." A blankness entered her eyes. Jester did not let go. "Good." His voice remained quiet. "Now tell me." He leaned slightly closer, eyes still holding hers in place. "What is going on?" Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a middle-aged woman stood behind the front counter of a moderately busy restaurant, listening with visible restraint to the loud complaints of a customer. "And I am telling you," the man said for what felt like the fifth time, "that your staff's attitude is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. I asked for a knife to cut my pasta, and she looked at me as if I had insulted her ancestors." The woman behind the counter did not look impressed. This woman was Aunt Mia, Lily's mother. She folded her arms and stared at the customer with a flat expression that only made him more irritated. "Sir," she said at last, her tone dry, "if my staff looked at you like that, maybe she had her reasons." The man nearly choked. "Excuse me?" Before the argument could continue, voices rose from the other side of the restaurant. Several customers had shifted their attention toward the large front windows. "Wait! Why is it so dark outside? Was it like this when we came in?" A chair scraped against the floor. Someone stood. Another customer. Pulled out a device and aimed it toward the glass. Aunt Mia's brows drew together. She turned and looked outside only once. That single glance was enough. Something in her expression changed immediately. Without another word, she bent down, grabbed her bag from beneath the counter, and slung it over her shoulder. One of the waitresses blinked. "Madam," Aunt Mia's voice cut through the room cleanly. "Close up. Everyone go home." The entire restaurant went still for a second. The complaining customer stared at her in disbelief. "Go home? What kind of service is this? We're still eating." Aunt Mia ignored him completely. She was already moving. One of the staff hurried after her. "But what about the bills? Take what's there and lock the doors after." "What's happening?" Aunt Mia did not slow down. "I said go home." There was a finality in her tone that brooked no further argument. Some of the customers began to grumble immediately. "What is wrong with this place? Like owner, like staff. Rude. This city's service keeps getting worse." Aunt Mia did not care. Not even a little. By the time the complaints finished, she was already heading downstairs. Right now, everything about the air felt wrong. She only moved faster. At that moment, only 4 thoughts mattered to her. Lily, Michael, Jester, and a small hope that this wasn't what she thought it was. Jester looked down at Lily's unconscious form with a thoughtful expression. He had not expected this. There was history here. And though it felt like too much of a coincidence, the cracks in the sky made it hard to deny that something similar to what Lily had once experienced was unfolding again. Which meant the situation was no longer just strange. It was dangerous. The question now was what he should do. His master's order had been clear. Protect the family. The most logical move was to grab Lily and Aunt Mia and leave the city as fast as possible. Jester had more than enough speed to cross Brightgate in a very short time. But the problem was that only Lily was with him now. He glanced toward the window, then back at her. He could not leave her here alone. Anything could happen in the time it took him to make the trip. Part of this difficulty came from the increased security around their home. Rushing out of the building carrying an unconscious person would draw attention immediately. There was a real chance someone would stop him, and the option to leave the city before things escalated would be delayed. Under ordinary circumstances, that would not matter. But in the middle of something like this, even a few seconds of unnecessary delay could become a serious problem. He clicked his tongue softly. Troublesome. His mind moved quickly. Option 1 was to remain here and wait for Aunt Mia to come to them. He dismissed that almost immediately. Being passive was not wise. He didn't even have time to be passive. Option 2 was to carry Lily and go find Aunt Mia himself, then leave together. Even before the thought fully formed, Jester already knew what he was going to do. Since heading out through the front would attract attention from those people who came from heavens nowhere, most likely the Federation, I'll just go around them. These past few months, Jester had done far more than simply protect the family or fill the absence his master had left behind. With the memories he had absorbed from the dead evil cultivator Li Yuan, combined with the resources his master had left to him, the Supers Association account, and the funds quietly sitting in his wallet, he had walked a path few could even begin to understand. Though he had not yet stepped into the nascent soul stage, the foundation he was building with the body his master had blessed him with had already pushed him far beyond what he had been when he first arrived in this world. Thanks to his craftiness, the means at his disposal were too many to count. Jester held the unconscious Lily carefully and without hesitation used Earth Escape, his figure sinking into the ground as though it were water. Everything beneath him parted silently around him, closing just as easily as he moved, leaving no trace behind as he made his way straight toward Aunt Mia's location. Above ground, the world was already beginning to change. The sky continued to fracture, and on the ground, cracks had started appearing as well. Unlike the ones in the sky, these were closer and somehow more immediate. They looked like they would fully open before the ones above ever did. That alone was enough to make the atmosphere in the city significantly worse, especially for those who still remembered what had happened to other cities a few months ago. High above, hidden in the first layer of the void, The two supernaturals watching Michael's house still had no idea their targets were already gone. From where they stood, the house below remained quiet. One of them narrowed his eyes slightly. "Should we move in now?" The other did not answer immediately. His gaze swept across the area below before he shook his head. "No. The chaos hasn't started yet." The first clicked his tongue softly but did not argue. "In any case, there's no need to rush," the other continued. "Other than our own people, no one is entering or leaving this city now. They had time. Moving now would only draw focus too early, and focus was exactly what they did not want." Back at the center of the city, Aunt Mia pushed through the front doors of the building and stepped out into the street. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone as she moved. "Come on." Her fingers moved quickly as she tried to book an Al-driven cab, but like everyone else in the city and beyond, she was met with no signal. Her brows tightened, but a quick glance at the chaos around her told her everything she needed to know. Even if she could book a ride, it would not reach her in time. And even if it did, it would be slower than running. "Fine." Aunt Mia bent slightly, slipped off her heels without hesitation, and shoved them into her bag. Then she ran. Based on what she was seeing, she could no longer deny what was happening. And if it was anything like last time, every second mattered. Her pace increased. She moved past confused civilians, sidestepped a man who nearly crashed into her, and cut across the street without glancing at the traffic signals. She had only been running for a short while when the ground directly in front of her bulged. Then a figure shot upward. Aunt Mia's eyes widened. "Ah, dash!" She lost her balance immediately and fell backward, landing hard. For a split second, fear spiked. Then she saw his face. Jester. He stood there as if he had simply stepped out of a door rather than the ground itself. Calm, unbothered, holding Lily carefully in his arms. Aunt Mia blinked in surprise, then the next second relief hit her so suddenly it almost made her dizzy. /N. Last day of the month. Thank you all for the support until now. It is very much appreciated. Also cast those last golden tickets you are holding. Jester. This strange boy who had appeared in their lives because of Michael. Even without Michael explaining anything, Aunt Mia had known from the beginning that he was not normal. No one with that kind of aura could be ordinary. The way he trained Lily, the small glimpses of power he revealed here and there, it had all been proof. And yet it had never felt wrong. That was the strange part. Normally, someone wearing her nephew's face and living under the same roof would have been unsettling. Creepy, even. But for some reason it wasn't. If anything, it made her feel like she had gone back to those earlier days when it was just her, Lily, and Michael. Life had been hard then, but it was simple and safe. Though that did not mean she wanted to go back. Reality snapped back in and her eyes moved immediately to Lily. What happened to her? She fainted. She's not injured. But we need to leave. His tone was calm, but there was something beneath it. Aunt Mia didn't argue. Not even for a second. If Jester was saying it, that was enough. She pushed herself up quickly, brushing dust from her clothes. Good. I was coming to get her anyway. Her gaze flickered briefly toward the sky. The cracks had grown larger. What do we need to do? She asked. There was not much panic in her voice. Fear, yes. Urgency, definitely. But panic had already been pushed aside by practical logic. At this point she could tell that aside from the Federation, Jester was the only one around her who could actually help. Jester was pleased by how cooperative she was. It's simple, he said. You just need to trust me. Aunt Mia looked at him. Jester looked back. Aunt Mia's body went still for a fraction of a second before the strength left her limbs. Her eyes lost focus and she slumped forward. Jester caught her before she hit the ground. The few nearby civilians who had already been unsettled by his sudden appearance from the earth, and the unconscious girl already in his arms, were now considerably more disturbed. One person took several steps back. Another muttered something under their breath. A woman pulled her child behind her instinctively. To them, the whole scene was deeply wrong. A young man had appeared from the ground, was already holding an unconscious girl, and now a grown woman had simply looked into his eyes and collapsed into his arms. Jester did not care. Not even slightly. The opinions of ordinary people occupied less of his attention than some of the random books he kept at home. The only thing currently on his mind was whether his master would blame him for knocking out 2 of his only family members. He considered that seriously for about a second, then found a logic that satisfied him well enough. Maybe he'll praise me instead. It was efficient, after all, and his master appreciated efficiency when it mattered. Without wasting more time, Jester adjusted both unconscious bodies in his arms. The weight meant almost nothing to him. Earth escape. He sank into the ground again. The street closed above him without a trace. Beneath the city, Jester moved quickly. His plan was simple. Leave Brightgate first. Whatever came after could be handled in motion. The earth parted smoothly around him, soil and stone flowing aside like obedient water. A moment later he rose near the edge of the city, having chosen a point with as little foot traffic as possible. He took 1 step forward. Something blocked him. A transparent wall. His foot stopped just short of it. From a distance it would have been impossible to notice. Even up close it was only visible because of the faint distortion it created in the surrounding mana, stretching upward and sideways further than his eyes could follow at a glance. A barrier. Jester turned his head and gave it a quick look, already understanding what it meant. The city had been sealed. He was silent for 1 brief moment. Then he muttered, F***K. To be honest, it couldn't be said Jester was truly frustrated. He simply felt the word suited the situation. On the opposite side of the city, the same word was being expressed. Rather differently. F***CK. Michael's figure tore through the air and stopped only when something solid met his fist. Boom! The sound exploded across the sky. A ring of force spread outward from the impact, distorting the air for dozens of meters in every direction. The thing in front of him did not even tremble. A transparent wall. Michael hit it again. Boom! Then again. Boom! 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 Each punch carried everything he could put into it from midair. The space around his arms distorted with every swing. Shockwaves rippled outward, and if anyone below had been close enough they would have seen the invisible surface shudder faintly under the pressure. But that was all. Just a ripple. Nothing more. Michael's expression darkened. He drove another punch into it, then another, faster, more violent, less controlled. The force behind each strike was more than enough to shatter ordinary barriers. This wall remained. After a long second he simply hovered there, breathing heavier than before, staring at the obstruction in front of him. Then he was forced to accept it. He couldn't break through. Michael slowly lowered his fist. Beyond the wall was the city. He had arrived only moments ago, but he had been too late. The city was already sealed and he was on the wrong side of it. For a moment he simply stared through the barrier, jaw tightening as he took in the chaos unfolding on the other side. His family was somewhere in there. Damn those demons who have nothing better to do. A cold rage settled into his chest. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the city, Jester finally noticed something. Master! Thanks to the connection shared between clone and master, both Jester and Michael could sense each other's presence. However, due to the distance between them, they could only get a rough sense of where the other was, and that brought another problem into focus immediately. They were on opposite ends of the city. Still, since arriving here, this was the first genuinely good news Michael had received. If Jester was inside the city, there was a good chance he was close to his family. There were many things Michael could doubt about Jester, but not his intelligence or his capability. At least before the danger of the cracks fully manifested, and given that what was unfolding seemed similar Woodstone, Jester should still be able to manage things on his end. What Michael needed now was a way through the barrier, and he happened to have an idea. He activated Wisdom's state immediately. The moment he did, his perception changed. The world sharpened. The barrier before him no longer looked like a simple transparent wall. Unfortunately, even with his connection to the void strengthened in this state, he still could not teleport through it. The barrier was interfering directly with space. Any attempt to force a jump would either fail outright or send him somewhere far worse. But what he saw next made his eyes flicker. The barrier was not perfect. Strong, yes, extremely so. Sophisticated, certainly. But not perfect. Like most things in the world, it had weak points. They were subtle enough that without wisdom state Michael doubted he would have found even one. A cold light entered his eyes. Without hesitation, he moved. His fist drove into one of the weak points. Boom! The ripple this time was different. Still small, still nowhere near enough to break through, but noticeably larger than anything his strikes had produced before. Michael's gaze sharpened immediately. He attacked again. Boom! And again. Boom! The weak point quivered slightly more with each impact, but it still wasn't enough. However, those results were enough for a theory to form. If I keep hitting the same point, maybe I can create a temporary opening. Even a gap no wider than a single person would be enough. Michael drew in a slow breath. Hope returned to his expression for the first time since he arrived. He knew it was easier said than done. A single weak point was still too resilient. Even with his attacks focused precisely where the barrier was least stable, progress was minimal. Then another thought came. His eyes moved across the barrier again. With his deepened perception, he could see that many of the weak points were not entirely isolated. They were separate, yes, but not truly independent. Several of them were connected through the same broader network of instability, which made him wonder, what if he attacked enough of them simultaneously? If he lacked the individual power to force open one point alone, then perhaps overwhelming several connected weak points together would produce the result he needed. The moment the idea formed, Michael acted on it. He reached into his soul space and brought out the damaged coffin. Of the forgotten. The coffin emerged beside him in midair, and Michael did not waste a second. From within, undead began to emerge. One after another. Then by the dozens. Then in a flood. 100 of his strongest undead appeared in their presence immediately thickening the atmosphere. Around him, beginning was absent, still focused on comprehending the path toward rank 4. Lily could not be summoned for far too many reasons, and Lucky remained within Michael as an engraving. So these were the next strongest. Ghost, Fade, Blue, Purple, Prince, undead humanoid warriors, casters, beasts, and more, all carrying at least rank 3 power. For a brief moment they hovered in silence, around their master. Then Michael's voice cut through the air. Spread out. They moved immediately. Under wisdom state, Michael identified one weak point after another, assigning groups to each location. Several undead rushed to each flawed section of the barrier he marked for them and stopped. Only when they reached their designated positions. Michael's eyes burned with cold focus. Keep hitting. The next instant, the sky outside Brightgate erupted in a storm of impacts. Boom, 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 boom. The barrier rippled across multiple points at once. An undead elephant rammed into one section with its full force. An enormous undead goat slammed into another. Spells burst outward from casters, striking weak points with concentrated energy. Heavy undead brutes hammered with fists, weapons, claws, and horns. Michael himself struck the central point of the pattern he had chosen, coordinating the sequence while the others assaulted the surrounding flaws. This time the result was immediate. The ripples grew far larger than anything produced before. They trembled across multiple sections simultaneously, waves interfering with one another as the strain began spreading through the connected weak points. Michael's eyes narrowed. Yes! The transparent wall began flashing irregularly under the combined assault. The distortion in the mana around it thickened. Michael did not relax. Harder. The undead obeyed instantly. The impacts intensified. Boom, 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 boom. From inside the city, anyone looking toward that section of the barrier would have seen something deeply unsettling. 100 undead suspended in the sky beyond the sealed wall, relentlessly hammering at it under their master's direction like an army trying to tear open the heavens themselves. In a secluded part of the city, Hidden beneath an uncompleted complex, several figures stood around a massive magic circle. The chamber was dim, lit only by the unstable glow of inscriptions carved into the floor. Black-blue lines pulsed slowly through the formation like veins. At the center of the circle stood a figure with both hands raised slightly, eyes closed, maintaining a complicated flow of energy through the array. Around him, the others waited in silence. Then one of them spoke. "How's the barrier?" His voice was low, but the tension inside it was impossible to miss. "The higher-ups want confirmation it's functioning properly. If not," he paused briefly, "we'll have to use our lives to compensate." A chill passed through the room. No one doubted that for even a second. This was the demonic faction. Among them, the strong preyed on the weak. If a mission of this scale collapsed because of incompetence, lives would indeed be taken. And not only one. The figure maintaining the circle finally opened his eyes. "Yes," he said. "It's stable." The room loosened by only the smallest amount. He continued calmly, his voice carrying quiet pride. "In any case, we've been preparing here for years. Though the Federation's recent actions forced us to move ahead of schedule, we were never unprepared. To break this barrier, they would need multiple Emperor-class supernaturals working in concert. And that's not something we're lacking on our end either. For all we know, both sides could be fighting right now." Hearing this, the other supernaturals smiled and began discussing among themselves, failing to notice that the expression on the face of the figure at the center had shifted briefly before he quickly concealed it. Did I sense that wrong? For just a moment he had felt something. A gap, faint and fleeting, opening somewhere in the barrier. But the sensation had disappeared. As fast as it came, and he found himself genuinely uncertain. He almost said something. Then he stopped himself. It would be embarrassing to announce that a gap had just opened in the barrier immediately after declaring it stable. And besides, he had most likely sensed wrong. Most likely. Back at the city's edge, Michael found himself staring at the transparent wall behind him with a trace of fear still lingering in his eyes. Just now, exactly as he had hoped, the combined pressure on the connected weak points had been enough to force the barrier into instability. For a fraction of a second, a gap had opened. Michael had moved the instant it appeared, not allowing himself even a moment to think, recalling his undead at the limit of his speed. Even then, it had been too close. If he had not been fast enough to pull the coffin back through before the gap closed, he would have lost the hand holding it on the other side of the barrier. Michael exhaled slowly. Only after forcing his breathing to settle did he stop looking at the barrier and turn his focus inward. Jester. The connection was still there. And unlike outside the city space, within the barrier was still usable. Without hesitation, Michael vanished, teleporting in Jester's direction. Each jump cut through large sections of the city, his figure appearing and disappearing so rapidly that to anyone who might have caught a glimpse of him, he would have looked like a flickering ghost. The ruined streets below blurred into fragments. Panicked civilians. Ground cracks splitting open. Supernaturals rising into the air. The darkened sky. Screams. Michael ignored all of it. Every jump brought him closer to Jester. On the opposite side of the city, Jester was still standing near the edge of the barrier with Aunt Mia and Lily in his arms when his eyes flickered slightly. A small smile formed on his lips. Master! The thought had barely crossed his mind when the space a short distance in front of him twisted. A figure stepped out of it. Michael. For 1 second, neither of them spoke. Then Michael's eyes moved immediately to the two unconscious bodies in Jester's arms. Aunt Mia. Lily. The tension in his chest loosened at once. He let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Michael stepped closer quickly, his eyes scanning both of them. Then, his gaze lifted to Jester. What happened? Lily reacted badly to the cracks in the sky, and though Aunt Mia was cooperative, I needed to make things easier. Michael stared at him. Jester stared back, perfectly calm. After a brief pause, Michael said, "You knocked both of them out." Michael did not really know what to say or how to react. Due to Jester's nature, Michael had always been cautious around him, especially in the beginning. That caution had lessened as Michael grew stronger, but it had never fully disappeared, and so hearing that Jester had actually touched his family had nearly stirred something close to anger in him. Then he stopped himself and wondered what exactly he was supposed to be angry about. He recognized the bias in his own thinking almost immediately. Somewhere inside him he had always assumed Jester was up to no good simply because of what Jester was, and that assumption had nearly caused him to react to something that was not actually a problem. His family was safe, unconscious, but accounted for. Michael forced himself to set the irritation aside and let it go. Jester looked at him. "What do we do now?" Michael's answer came without hesitation. "We get out of the city." Neither of them said anything beyond that. There was no mention of the people still trapped inside. No discussion of what would happen to Brightgate while they left. The silence on that subject was simply there, and both of them let it sit without comment. For Michael, the priority was his family. Getting them out and to safety came first. Everything else followed after that. For Jester, the reasoning was considerably simpler. He wanted things to go back to how they were yesterday. The city could handle its own problems. That was not his concern. "How?" Jester asked. "We're sealed in. But since you made it here, I assume you already have something in mind." Michael nodded. "The barrier has weak points. They're barely visible under normal circumstances, but with the right perception they become readable. I found a pattern in how several of them connect. And if enough pressure is applied to those connected points at the same time." Jester completed the thought without pausing. "A temporary gap opens in the network before the formation can compensate." Michael looked at him for a moment. "How long does the gap stay open?" Jester asked. "Not long. A second at most, probably less. Which means we move the moment it appears and we do not hesitate." Jester glanced down at Aunt Mia and Lily, both still unconscious in his arms, then back at Michael. "Lead the way, Master." Michael nodded and had just summoned the damaged coffin of the Forgotten when his expression changed. "Come out," he said sharply, addressing a specific point in the air, and two figures immediately appeared. "To think you were able to sense us," one of them said, sounding almost impressed, only to be met with Michael's cold stare. The other looked at Jester and the two unconscious figures in his arms with quiet interest before shifting his attention to the transparent wall behind them. "Well," he said, "this makes things considerably easier for us." These two were the demonic supernaturals who had been stationed outside Michael's apartment, their assignment being to take his family. A short while earlier, when the ground cracks began opening and creatures started pouring into the city, they had taken that as their signal and entered Michael's home directly, only to find it empty. Fortunately for them, they had not been careless. Earlier that morning, when Aunt Mia left for work, they had quietly placed a tracking spell on her without her knowledge. Through that connection, they had followed her here. What they had not expected was to find Michael as well. For a moment, both of them studied him. Michael's anger climbed steadily at the sight of the two hovering above him. He did not yet know the full story, but he did not need it. They were demonic supernaturals, and they had clearly been after his family. That alone was enough. A cold pressure rolled off him as his eyes locked onto them, the fury in his chest building until even the already unstable air around them seemed to respond to it. Their presence also made one thing clear. As long as they were here, he could not focus entirely on breaking through the wall behind him. That irritated him further. Under the surprised eyes of the two intruders, Michael placed Jester and the two unconscious figures into the miniature coffin, which disappeared immediately after. For the first time, one of the demonic supernaturals lost his composure. His expression darkened. "Our targets, dash." Then he stopped. The anger faded and a slow smile returned to his face. The family had never truly been the primary objective. Their only real value had been as leverage to reach Michael. Michael himself was always the one that mattered most. If the family had vanished into whatever that item was, that was fine. They would simply take him instead. The second demonic supernatural had clearly arrived at the same conclusion. His gaze on Michael shifted, settling into something calmer and more calculating. "Well," he said, That works too. Michael said nothing. His eyes were cold. The first one looked him over carefully, reading his aura. Rank 3, clearly, and from everything they had heard about him he was likely stronger than the average rank 3. But they were both late-stage rank 3 with considerable experience behind them. They did not believe for a single moment that this boy could resist them. One of them took a slow step forward in midair. Come quietly. If you do that, perhaps your family suffers less later. Michael's expression did not change. Inside, however, something dark settled deeper into his chest. He was already angry. That sentence made it considerably worse. The second one stepped forward as well, positioning himself slightly to the side, naturally cutting off retreat without needing to announce it. This city is sealed. The Federation is trapped. You are trapped. A faint smile touched his lips. You should understand by now that standing against us accomplishes nothing. Michael finally spoke, his voice completely flat. You talk too much. The first one chuckled. And you don't understand your position. Michael's shoulders loosened slightly. Then he moved first. His figure vanished and reappeared directly in front of the one on the left, fist already halfway to the man's face with enough force behind it to split the air open. And something did split open. The demonic supernatural's head. Bone, flesh, and blood exploded outward in a violent spray, the shockwave distorting the air around them for several meters in every direction. For a fraction of a second everything went still. The second demonic supernatural froze. His mind went blank. He had known Michael was stronger than the average rank 3. But there was a significant difference between accepting something as information and watching it happen directly in front of you. His partner's head had simply ceased to exist. Horror crept into his expression. Then his head burst open as well. Both bodies remained suspended in the air for the briefest instant, so he had continued watching. For a while nothing appeared visibly wrong and others around him talked amongst themselves. Ash said nothing. Then his eyes narrowed. Among the countless impacts striking the barrier from the outside, one section stood out. It was being struck harder than the rest. His expression changed completely. Something's wrong. As his reaction was quite visible, the others around focused on him. /N. Happy New Month, dear readers. Since his expression wasn't subtle, the others around him immediately noticed. What is it? One of them asked, his tone tightening. The man hesitated for a brief moment, eyes still fixed on the formation. I'm not sure yet, he said slowly. That answer did not reassure anyone. A few of them exchanged glances. Then why are you looking like that? Another pressed. He did not reply immediately. Instead, he raised his hand slightly and pointed in a specific direction. Some of you should head there. Confusion appeared on their faces almost instantly. That direction? Why? I said I'm not sure, he replied, this time with a sharper edge. But something there is off. There was a brief pause. Then 3 of them stepped forward without further argument. If there was even a chance something was wrong with the barrier, ignoring it would prove foolish. It was better to confirm a mistake than to make one. The 3 left while the rest stayed behind. Michael knew none of this. He commanded his undead to strike harder at the points he had designated and watched the ripples grow larger with each impact. He increased his own output alongside them, trying to focus, though the sounds behind him made that difficult. Even before his advancement, his senses had already been sharp. The screams reached him clearly without needing to turn around. He did not need to look to know that the cracks below had erupted and the city had fallen into chaos. For a brief moment Michael felt a pull of guilt. People were dying behind him and he was leaving. He clenched his jaw slightly and forced the thought down. On the surface layer of the void, where reality could still be interfered with, the 3 demonic supernaturals finally arrived at Michael's location following the guidance of the one maintaining the barrier. Now they understood the expression on his face. None of them moved immediately. Their eyes were locked on the scene in front of them. 100 rank 3 undead. Their collective presence making the air feel noticeably heavier. One of them swallowed without meaning to. How? The question slipped out before he could stop it. He could tell immediately that these undead had not come through the cracks. All three shifted their gaze from the undead to Michael, or rather to his back, since they could not see his face. But they could feel the power radiating from him. "He's the one controlling them," one of them said quietly. "What is a necromancer doing here? He's definitely not one of ours. He must be from the Federation." The third frowned slightly. "Very possible." It was not that they had no desire to stop what was happening. They did. But they did not want to die. 100 rank 3 undead under the command of someone capable of reading and interfering with the barrier itself was not a fight they could confidently win. They were dangerous, not stupid. The three exchanged glances. "Let's just report this," one of them said quietly. The others nodded. That was the safest choice. Slowly and carefully they began to withdraw. They still believed. Michael hadn't noticed them, which was a reasonable assumption. There were not many powerful demonic supernaturals who could not conceal their presence effectively. But Michael had already been aware of them from the moment their attention settled fully on him. Just as the three prepared to teleport, they froze. A fine line appeared around each of their necks and they were forced out of the void. Simultaneously, the last thing they saw was a figure hovering in the air, watching their falling bodies with an unreadable expression. It was Fade, Michael's most capable undead assassin. After killing the three, Fade did not linger. The moment the bodies began to fall, his figure blurred and reappeared beside the barrier at his assigned position. Without waiting for an order, he raised his arm and struck the exact point Michael had designated. Boom! The impact blended seamlessly into the rhythm of the others. Michael did not look back. He had registered everything the moment. It happened and set it aside just as quickly. "Keep hitting." His voice remained calm. The pressure on the barrier surged again, the instability reaching its peak. Then it opened. A gap. Michael moved instantly. In the same moment all his undead vanished, pulled back into the damaged coffin of the Forgotten at the limit of his speed. The coffin shrank and disappeared into his soul space immediately after. Michael moved forward and crossed. The moment his body passed through, the gap collapsed behind him, sealing shut as if it had never existed. The barrier stabilized again. Michael let out a slow breath the moment he cleared it. Relief came first. A brief sharp sense of release. He was outside. The barrier was behind him. His family was safe within the coffin. Everything he had pushed toward through the past stretch of chaos had been achieved. And yet the happiness he expected never came. Nothing settled in his chest the way he thought it would. Michael frowned slightly and rose higher into the air until the city spread out more clearly beneath him. From up here, Brightgate looked worse. Much worse. The cracks on the ground had already fully erupted in several districts. Dark fissures ran like infected wounds through streets and intersections, and from them creatures continued to pour out. Some were already dead, their bodies scattered across broken roads and collapsed storefronts, but many more were still moving. Fires had started in several places. Screams rose constantly, sometimes in bursts, sometimes all at once, blending into a single sound that reached him even at this height. Michael stared at all of it. He had made it out. His family was safe, but he could not pretend nothing was happening, could not turn away and act as though the city below meant nothing. To abandon all those people and behave as if it were someone else's problem entirely. That was not him. At least not yet. Michael thought seriously. From what he could see, the current danger level of the city was not something beyond his ability anymore. If he were alone, with no burden and no family to protect, he would not even hesitate to stay. The only reason he had wanted to leave immediately was because Aunt Mia and Lily were here. He could not put them in danger. But he also knew something else. If he did absolutely nothing now, there was a good chance he would regret it later. Maybe not forever, but long enough to matter. His jaw tightened. A moment later Michael was back on the ground with two other figures beside him, Spartan and Ghost. Spartan was looking at the ring his master had just placed in his hand. Michael spoke without wasting time. "What I want you to do is simple." Both undead focused on him. "Stay far from the city, but not too far. Find a safe distance. His gaze settled on Spartan's hand. And protect that ring at all costs. The ring was not ordinary. It was the epic-grade storage ring he had obtained from his advancement mission, and right now it contained his family and Jester. Spartan closed his fingers slightly, acknowledging the weight of the responsibility without needing to say anything. Michael watched him for a moment, then nodded faintly. After a brief pause, he summoned his coffin again, and a ripple of space appeared. Beside him, a small figure blinked into existence, then out again, then back once. More. Mas. Tur. Wisdom appeared, vanished, reappeared upside down, then corrected itself, its voice uneven but unmistakably cheerful. Michael gestured toward Spartan and Ghost. Teleport them somewhere safe. Not too far from here. Wisdom tilted slightly. Sa. Fey. But. Near. Yes, Michael said. If you encounter anything you cannot handle, do not fight. Just keep teleporting. Wisdom's body shimmered as it processed the instruction. Run. Run. Keep. Go. Exactly. Spartan stepped forward without hesitation. Ghost followed. Neither questioned the order. As Wisdom's space flickered around them, Michael spoke one last time. Do not let anything happen to that ring. Spartan nodded once. Then they were gone. The space around Michael fell quiet again, with only the distant sound of chaos remaining. He stood there alone for a second. Then he turned back toward the city. Using the same method as before, this time with considerably more proficiency, Michael entered the city again. Far away from him, deep within the formation chamber, the atmosphere had already turned tense. The three who had been sent out earlier had not returned. At first no one spoke of it. Then one voice broke the silence. They're late. One of the individuals frowned slightly. Could be the Federation, holding them back. Another nodded faintly. Possible. But the man at the center said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on the formation. Then his expression shifted, just as it had a short while ago. His pupils contracted. Once could be dismissed, twice could not. A cold thought formed and he trembled slightly. Someone that was. Not one of them could enter and leave the barrier at will. He ran through possibilities quickly. A king rank? No. Even among king rank individuals, very few should be capable of doing anything to this barrier. And even if it were one, that would mean someone extraordinarily powerful had entered the city. His fingers tightened. A worse thought followed. Emperor class. The words did not leave his mouth, but the possibility settled heavily in his mind. If that was true, none of them here could handle it. Not even together. Fear surfaced briefly before his expression hardened. Prepare the special communication. His voice cut through the chamber sharply. Everyone froze. What? One of them looked at him. For what dash? I said prepare it. There was no room for questioning this time. Several figures immediately began making preparations. A street not far from one of the larger ground cracks had once been crowded with ordinary life. Now it was chaos. People ran in every direction, their footsteps uneven and their breathing ragged. Some shouted warnings. Others screamed names. Many said nothing at all, driven forward by pure instinct. Among them was a family. The father ran in front with one hand gripping his son tightly. The boy could barely keep up, his legs stumbling as he tried to match the pace. Behind them the mother followed, her breathing already labored. One arm pressed against her side as she pushed herself forward. Don't stop, the father shouted without looking back. I'm trying, the boy cried, his voice breaking. A roar sounded behind them. The father risked a glance back in his face drained of color. Faster! The crowd surged. Someone struck him from the side. Another pushed past. The pressure increased as more people poured into the same street, all trying to force themselves through the same narrow path. Then it happened. A man shoved past harder than the rest and the father lost his footing. His grip on his son slipped. The boy stumbled and fell. Dad! The crowd did not stop. Feet struck the ground around the boy, some barely missing him, others not even registering his presence. The mother screamed and pushed forward trying to reach him, but someone slammed into her from the side and sent her crashing against the wall. Wait! Stop! No one listened. No one slowed, because behind them the monsters were already there. The first creature leapt into the street, its body twisted and elongated, its limbs dragging unnaturally across the ground as it moved. Its mouth opened far too wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. As it let out a shriek that cut clean through the chaos, the father forced his way back, ignoring the bodies slamming into him. My son! He reached the boy just as the child tried to push himself upright. But it was already too late. A shadow fell over them both. The creature had arrived. His head tilted slightly as if curious. Then it lunged. The father turned instinctively and pulled his son into his chest, shielding him with his own body. The mother screamed, and in that moment a strange sudden silence followed. The creature that had lunged froze mid-motion. Then its head slid off cleanly. Its body remained standing for a fraction of a second before collapsing heavily onto the ground. Then the others followed. One by one, every monster in the surrounding area lost its head, blood spreading across the cracked street in uneven lines. Slowly the people below looked up. High above them, suspended in the air, was a figure in black clothing. Even from a distance they could see the glowing green eyes, empty of any emotion. The father's grip tightened unconsciously around his son. The boy stared upward, trembling. The mother, still half on the ground, felt her breath catch in her chest. The figure did not speak. A second later it vanished. Across Bright Gate the same scene repeated. Again and again and again. On one street, a group of civilians cornered inside a collapsed bus watched as something flickered into existence above them. A figure in black with glowing green eyes. The creatures clawing at the metal split apart before they even understood what had happened. In another district, a squad of exhausted cultivators from the Supers Association branch bracing for the worst saw a blur cut through the battlefield around them. Every monster in range lost its head in the same instant. When they looked up, they caught a glimpse of a figure standing in the air for less than a second before it disappeared. In a narrow alleyway choked with debris, 5 survivors pressed against broken stone as monsters closed in from both sides. One man raised a trembling weapon, even if he knew it was not enough to do anything. Then everything froze. The creatures collapsed one by one, heads sliding clean off before their bodies hit the ground. They looked up to find a figure floating in mid-air. Then it was gone a second later. High above the city, Michael watched in silence as something stirred inside him. Below, his undead had spread throughout Bright Gate. At the same time, he spotted other figures moving through the chaos. Cultivators from the Supers Association branch, some coordinating evacuations on the ground, others flying through the air and striking at larger threats, working to stop the damage from spreading further. Thanks to being in fade state, none of them noticed him hovering above. Michael's eyes trembled slightly. To think a day would come when he had the power to help defend an entire city. And it had not even been a full year since his awakening ceremony. That thought stirred too many things in him at once. Shock, pride, disbelief, gratitude, and a faint trace of bitterness as well, because he knew exactly how much it had cost him to reach this point. Part of his attention remained fixed on his undead. Nearly 200 of them were now spread across the city. Looking at their identical black clothing, Michael found himself thinking it might be worth finding a wider variety of outfits for their human forms. Then he immediately shook his head. Later, perhaps. Besides, it was the most practical option. Most of his undead reverted to their true forms during combat anyway, and that usually left them without clothes once they returned to human form. Spending resources on clothing that would be destroyed every few fights was not sensible. Still, watching those black-clothed figures with glowing green eyes appear and vanish all across the city did produce a certain impression. Michael stared for a moment longer, then let out a breath somewhere between amusement and resignation. I really do look like some kind of evil final boss. He shook that thought away. In any case, with this many undead spread across the city, Even when the remaining cracks open, the situation should hold. The intensity of this attack felt similar to what had happened in Woodstone, where the strongest threats had capped out at rank 3. That level of danger was almost non-existent to the current Michael, given that all his undead operated at that level. The only thing that genuinely concerned him were the demonic supernaturals still hidden somewhere in the city. Even if he wanted to root them out, in a place this large it was not impossible, but it was far from easy. Maintaining stability across the city was the better use of his focus. As he watched the situation below, another thought surfaced. What could he actually gain from this? Back in Woodstone, every monster he killed had been sold to the Federation, earning him the largest single sum of money he had seen in the early days of his awakening. With his current capabilities and the potential to account for most of the monsters in this attack, he could not even begin to estimate what this might be worth. With this, I might be able to pay my debt to Rin and leave some funds for my family before I leave. At least thanks to Director Lin, I do not have to worry about the cost of repairing the manor. Then a different thought surfaced. What about the debt he owed the elves? Michael conveniently directed his mind elsewhere. That particular debt was not something the current version of him could afford to even begin thinking about. After this, I should also deal with the situation inside the coffin, he thought, already feeling a mild headache forming. There was Lily's lightning tribulation still waiting. The frozen rank 4 demonic supernatural, beginning who would need to advance soon. And the body of the foreign rank 4 from the Drake race. As the situation across Brightgate slowly began to stabilize, a very different kind of panic was spreading in another part of the city. The demonic supernaturals hidden within the city felt their blood run cold. More than 100 king-rank experts have appeared. That's impossible. Didn't he say the barrier was working? The accusations immediately turned on the figure seated within the magic circle. Voices rose with each passing second, curses mixing with fear, as they demanded an explanation for how so many powerful existences had entered the sealed city. The man at the center had barely opened his mouth when space itself shook. A crack tore open within the chamber. The next instant, a man stepped through. The aura that entered with him was suffocating. Crashed into the room like a mountain falling from the sky. Every person present except the one inside the formation dropped to their knees instantly, bones straining, organs trembling, faces draining of color from the pressure alone. A king-rank demonic cultivator. The moment he appeared, he struck first. His palm smashed into the figure maintaining the barrier, sending him crashing sideways out of the formation's center. Blood burst from the man's mouth and chest simultaneously. Half his meridians collapsed from the single impact and his aura fractured into disorder. The others pressed lower in terror, not daring to breathe too loudly. The king-rank cultivator looked down at the injured man with cold fury. You told us the barrier was stable. The man coughed blood, his face pale with pain and fear. It was. It is. I sensed fluctuations. But what? The voice was like ice. The entire chamber felt colder. One of the kneeling supernaturals, unable to contain the fear any longer, forced out a trembling question. How could so many people have entered the city? The king-rank cultivator's expression darkened. He had already checked. The number of hostile presences inside Brightgate had grown far beyond what should have been possible. He stared at the half-crippled man for a few seconds longer, his expression unreadable. Then he exhaled slowly. It doesn't matter. He straightened and withdrew his pressure slightly, his gaze moving across the kneeling figures one by one. From the beginning, our numbers here were never large. And with the Federation's forces appearing at this scale, the plan is already beyond salvaging. He turned away. If you want to live, leave the city. This place is finished. No one argued. The moment his figure began to fade, several of the others moved immediately as well. The departure of the demonic supernaturals caused no noticeable disturbance. Michael was not aware they had begun to retreat. From his position, the threat still appeared to be present within the city, so he did not relax for a single moment. He continued focusing entirely on suppressing the ongoing disaster, and the few demonic supernaturals who passed through his range of perception did not survive long enough to escape. The moment any of them revealed even the faintest presence, they were eliminated without hesitation. As the battle wore on, the final wave arrived. Rank 3 monsters began descending from the sky in scattered numbers, emerging from the last remaining unstable cracks. They met the same end as everything before them, cut down mid-descent before they could reach the ground. Then, one after another, the cracks began to close. The unstable tears in space sealed shut completely. And just like that, it was over. Couldn't be said that the chaos was truly over. Even after the last of the monsters fell, their bodies littering the streets and staining the city in dark streaks of blood, the barrier surrounding Brightgate remained intact. To Michael, that alone meant the threat had not been completely removed. There are probably still some demonic supernaturals in the city. From his perspective, the reason the barrier was still up was because remnants of the demonic faction were likely maintaining it from somewhere within. He immediately commanded his now idle undead to start searching the city for traces of demonic cultivators. With 200 rank 3 undead, it likely would not take long. The moment the barrier came down, Michael would go and retrieve his family. Even now he could still sense the location of his undead and the storage ring bound to him. His undead spread out even further, no longer just eliminating visible threats but sweeping through the city with their senses extended, which at times made the people they passed shiver in a mix of fear and awe. Michael joined in as well, his senses stretched to their limit as he scanned for anything abnormal. Compared to his previous ceiling of 10,000 meters, he could now reach as far as 50,000. The load of information flooding his mind was enormous, but thanks to his high intelligence, which directly boosted his thinking capacity, it did not bother him. The search on his end did not last long. One of his undead had just entered a partially collapsed district when it was suddenly stopped by a cultivator from the Supers Association. The man stood in the middle of the street, his aura still unstable from the recent battle. Both sides stopped. The undead did not move and the cultivator did not attack, but the tension between them rose instantly. Reading the message relayed to him, Michael teleported in that direction without hesitation. Mike's time in Brightgate City, serving as one of the higher-ranking figures within the Supers Association branch, had been relatively uneventful. And truthfully, he preferred it that way. Compared to others who chased danger, conflict, and breakthroughs through life-and-death battles, Mike had always leaned toward stability. A life where things could be controlled, where disasters were rare and peace was maintained. Perhaps it was as they say. As one grows older, the realities of life wear down the burning fire they had in their youth. Perhaps it was exactly this mindset that had caused his progress to stagnate. Even after years, he remained at the peak of rank 2. There had been moments when he tried to justify it. At times he blamed the environment, being stationed in a cultivation academy instead of an Awakeners academy, being surrounded by people who followed a different path, a different system, a different pace. But deep down he knew that was not the truth. If anything, that environment had benefited him. Within the cultivation academy he stood out, an awakener among cultivators. His position, his authority, even his reputation were things he would not have had if he had been placed in an Awakeners academy instead. He knew his limits. Not that he was worse than other Awakeners, he was certainly not below average, but Mike understood this clearly, which was why he never truly resented his situation. With his connections, Mike had been able to secure a stable position working for the Federation within Brightgate. The pay was good, the responsibilities were manageable, and while the city was not considered high-tier, among mid-tier cities it was decent enough to build a comfortable life. At least, that had been the case until about a month ago when everything began to change. Traces of both the Federation and the demonic faction started appearing more frequently within the city. The workload that had once been steady quickly grew overwhelming. And Mike knew exactly why. Michael Norman, a certain talented awakener. After looking into the youth more carefully, Mike could not help feeling a trace of unease. The kind of growth that boy displayed was not normal. Someone like that would not remain below him for long. If anything, it was only a matter of time before their positions reversed entirely. He had probably never been truly below him from the start either. And that was where the unease lay. A few months ago, Mike had personally introduced Michael to what he privately called the tax-paying society, a system where logic did not always matter but money certainly did. It had been routine for him at the time, just another task, another name on a list. But now, thinking back on it, he felt a faint headache forming. For someone who would likely surpass him in the future, that was not exactly the kind of first impression he wanted to leave behind. He had even considered approaching the family, building a better relationship under the reasonable guise of appreciating their talented member. Unfortunately, before he could take even a first step in that direction, the demonic faction struck and everything spiraled out of control. Fortunately, some mysterious individuals appeared just in time to support the city's defenses. What should have turned into a complete disaster instead became something unexpectedly manageable. The destruction was still severe and lives were lost, but it was far from the total collapse he had feared. However, for Mike, that fortunate development only deepened his unease. When hundreds of unknown figures suddenly appeared within a sealed city and displayed strength far beyond his own, fear naturally followed. As one of the leaders within the Supers Association branch, he had no choice but to investigate. No matter how dangerous it seemed, understanding their purpose was now part of his responsibility. That investigation had led to the current situation, where he stood face to face with something he could not easily explain. The first thing Mike noticed about the figure standing before him was not her appearance but the feeling she gave off. She looked human. There was nothing outwardly wrong. Her features were normal. But the longer he stood there, the more that faint sense of wrongness grew. Her skin carried a pale tone that somehow looked both healthy and unwell at the same time. And then there were her eyes. Green. Mike kept his expression calm even as his guard rose internally. "Who are you?" No response. She only looked at him. He frowned slightly and continued, his tone measured. "Are you part of the group that entered the city? Federation support? Another branch? I would appreciate it if you could clear up my confusion." What he got in return was still silence. Mike asked more questions, one after another. Each time the result was the same. No reply. His unease deepened considerably. Just as he was about to pull back and reconsider his approach, the space beside the woman distorted. A tier opened silently and someone stepped through it. The moment Mike saw him, his expression changed. Everything suddenly made sense. The same pale tone. The same strange quality of looking both healthy and wrong at the same time. The same glowing green eyes. They were identical in nature. But unlike the woman, this one carried a presence Mike immediately recognized. His throat felt slightly dry. Michael Norman. Michael paused slightly when he saw the man in front of him. "Mr. Mike." There was a trace of surprise in his voice. Out of all the people he expected to meet in this situation, Mike was not one of them. Still, their past interaction had left enough of an impression for Michael to recognize him immediately. Mike hesitated. Then he asked the question that had been forming since he first noticed the woman. "Who is she to you?" Michael glanced at the woman beside him, then answered calmly. "She's my undead." The words landed like quiet thunder. Mike's pupils shrank. For a moment his mind went completely blank. His gaze shifted back to the woman, then to Michael, then back again. Everything clicked into place after seeing Michael properly. He had caught glimpses of similar figures moving through the city during the chaos, and now the connection was obvious. At the same time, a thought surfaced that he could not suppress. Why did they look like this? He had seen necromancers before. Their undead were grotesque. Rotting flesh, exposed bone, twisted forms that clearly no longer belonged among the living. But these looked human. Too human. If Michael had not said it himself, Mike would never have guessed. The mystery only deepened, but Mike did not voice any of it. Some questions were better left unasked. But if what Michael said was true with his current power, was he not already equivalent to a formidable supernatural organization on his own? At the same time, Michael's use of spatial movement had also revealed his rank 3 status to Mike clearly enough. Mike felt a chill run down his spine. He took a slow breath and lowered his head slightly. "Thank you." No matter what Michael was, no matter how strange his power had become, one thing was undeniable. Without him, Brightgate would not have survived this. After briefly sharing his thoughts about the barrier, both of them reached the same conclusion. Mike chose to return to the Supers Association to gather manpower and organize a coordinated search across the city, leaving Michael to continue in his own way. With their roles silently divided, they parted without unnecessary words. Michael did not dwell on it. His undead were already spread across Brightgate, sweeping through every district with precision. Compared to the association's slower, more methodical approach, his network operated like a silent net closing in from all directions. Every movement was fed back to him in real time. Not long after, a signal came. Fade had found something. Without hesitation, Michael shifted through space. The next moment, the ruined streets of Brightgate were replaced by darkness. He appeared within a hidden underground chamber. The air carried the sharp scent of blood mixed with lingering traces of energy. A large magic circle occupied most of the floor space. At a distance from the formation lay a figure, a man. His body was drenched in blood, his breathing shallow and uneven. His aura was in complete disarray. Even without moving closer, it was obvious he had been critically injured. Without thinking too much, Michael already understood what this place was. A demonic hideout. The state of the chamber made it even clearer. Keeping Fade away from the magic circle, Michael stepped forward carefully. The man on the ground remained unconscious, his condition worsening by the second. Michael paused for a brief moment, considering his options. Killing him would be simple, but he figured there were better uses for someone in this condition. After a short thought, Michael decided. He raised his hand and used one of the few techniques he had picked up over the past months, casting a sleeping spell over the already unconscious figure to ensure he would not wake prematurely. Then, without hesitation, he opened the damaged coffin of the Forgotten and placed the body inside. The reason for this was straightforward. Michael wanted to investigate the demonic faction's current situation more thoroughly later, and he felt more at ease leaving that kind of work to Jester. If anything went wrong, it would not fall directly on him, and more importantly, Jester was far better suited for handling minds and extracting information cleanly. Only after that did Michael turn his attention to the magic circle. He studied it briefly. Compared to before, his knowledge of magical formations had improved significantly. But even so, what lay before him was far beyond something he could easily decipher. What he could tell was that it was drawing mana from the surroundings and sustaining something through that connection. Michael did not waste time trying to understand it further. Since it had been created by the demonic faction, it was reasonable to assume it was doing nothing good. He chose the simplest method, the most direct one. Mana gathered around his hand, reinforced by a trace of spatial energy. The air distorted slightly as the power condensed. Then he punched down. The magic circle shattered. The lines broke apart violently, the structure collapsing instantly as the flow of energy was severed. At the same moment, feedback came from across the city through his undead. The barrier covering Brightgate had disappeared. Michael was only mildly surprised. This outcome had already been part of his suspicion. From the moment he first sensed the abnormality of the barrier, he had considered the possibility that its source was hidden somewhere within the city. Now that the core had been destroyed, everything aligned with his expectations. More importantly, the biggest issue had been resolved. The barrier was gone. The city was no longer sealed. For the first time since the chaos began, Michael allowed a small part of his attention to relax. There were still remnants to clean up, but compared to before, the situation was now completely under control. That meant one thing. It was time to retrieve his family. In the time that followed, Michael moved through the outskirts of the city, locating and recalling several of his undead that had spread too far during the battle. At the same time, he left the majority of them within Brightgate, allowing them to continue assisting the Supers Association where necessary, but more importantly to maintain order and suppress any lingering unrest. With nearly 200 rank 3 undead stationed across the city, even without direct commands, their mere presence was enough to keep the situation stable. Not long after, Michael returned. When he reappeared within Brightgate, the chaos had already begun settling into an uneasy calm. Fires were being put out, survivors were being gathered, and the association had started regaining control of the streets. In the sitting room of his home within the city, Michael stood quietly for a moment before raising his hand. The ring on his finger flickered. The next instant, figures began to appear one after another. Aside from Jester, his aunt, and Lily, there were several other undead that had been held within the space. Michael gathered them into the damaged coffin of the Forgotten without wasting time. Only then did he focus on the most immediate matter. His gaze shifted toward Jester. "Why are they still unconscious?" Jester responded calmly. Each time they had shown signs of waking, he had suppressed it, keeping them in a controlled state of sleep to prevent panic. Michael nodded slightly. Though the idea of keeping his family unconscious sat uncomfortably with him, he understood it had been the right call. At the very least, when they woke up, the city would have started showing some signs of life again. After having Jester take the two of them to a guest room, Michael sat down in the living room to think. He was going to be leaving Aurora soon. His original plan had been to move his family closer to the academy, but after what had just happened, Michael was no longer certain there was any truly safe place left in Aurora. That did not mean he thought his earlier decision was wrong, but he could see clearly now that it was not enough on its own. To Michael, there was only one real solution. He still intended to have his family move out of the city, but unlike before, he was going to make them more secure in his own way. The plan to evolve Aunt Mia and Lily would be brought forward. Alongside that would come evolving his undead. Jester in particular was the only one still at rank 2, and unlike the others, evolving him carried no concerns. With Jester at rank 3 or potentially rank 4 if circumstances allowed, combined with another undead at rank 4 and his family having cultivated power of their own, Michael believed that level of protection would be enough to keep them safe in Aurora while he was away. It would be best if Lily can awaken a class within 3 months. I wonder if the academy can give me that much time before I need to leave. As Michael was deep in thoughts about the future and if the situation back at the academy was resolved as well, Jester came to the sitting room bringing Michael out of his thoughts. Jester inclined his head slightly. "Welcome back, Master." Michael's gaze lingered on him for a moment, his expression turning somewhat odd. Among all his undead, Jester stood apart. It was not just strength. It was everything else. Knowledge, awareness, the way he thought, the way he acted, the way he spoke. If not for knowing the truth, it would have been easy to mistake him for a living human. In many ways, Jester felt more alive than most of the undead under his command. He was at the very top. To be honest, placing someone like Jester here to guard his home was overkill. And yet, because of those exact qualities, Michael felt at ease. There was a strange sense of reliability in knowing that someone who could think, judge, and adapt like a human was the one watching over his family in his absence. After a brief silence, Michael spoke. "How has it been?" He did not specify. He did not need to, as Jester understood. "The past few months have been stable," Jester replied calmly. "There were no incidents that posed a direct threat to your family." He paused briefly before continuing. "Most developments were centered around Lily." Michael's attention sharpened slightly. With consistent training, her combat capabilities have improved significantly. At her current level, she can disarm at least 5 grown men without difficulty. She is also proficient with 2 weapons and can switch between them seamlessly in combat. Michael nodded faintly. That level of progress was not ordinary. He wondered just what sort of methods Jester used to achieve this. After all, even without a system, even without formal awakening, she had already reached a level that most normal people could never touch. Jester continued. "She is also approaching an awakening threshold." Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. "A supernatural threshold," Jester clarified. "Based on her current progress, she should be able to achieve it within 2 months. Michael fell silent for a moment. 2 months. Faster than he expected, but it was not a bad thing. His gaze lowered slightly, thoughts moving rapidly beneath the surface. At that point, Michael found himself hoping Lily could awaken. But he did not have any real confidence in it. Awakening was rare. No matter how much potential someone showed before that point, no matter how hard they trained, it did not guarantee anything. Too many people reached the age limit and remained ordinary. Lily was 16 now. That meant she still had 3 chances. 3 opportunities before she turned 18 and the window closed completely. Even so, it was still very possible for her to fail. Michael had seen enough understand that reality. Because of that, he could not base any of his plans around her. Awakening. Hope was one thing. Reliance was another. Those thoughts passed quickly through his mind before he looked back at Jester. "And you?" Michael asked. He already had an idea. He could see the level clearly. Level 50. But Jester was not following the same path as the others. Jester inclined his head slightly. "Thanks to your glorious body, Master, my progress has been smooth. I have already completed foundation establishment, and I have also formed a golden core." There was no pride in his voice, just a statement of fact. "With some additional refinement, by the time Lily reaches her threshold, I should already be preparing for the nascent soul stage." A brief pause. "In truth, I have already stepped into it." Michael did not respond immediately. Golden core. 1 step into nascent soul. Even for that world standards, that was fast. Too fast. But considering who Jester was and what he had access to, it made sense. However, was it that Jester was a freak, or his body was just that good? Michael didn't know, but he did not think too deep into it. "Jester, come. I have a task for you." But Jester was not following the same path as the others. Jester inclined his head slightly. "Thanks to your glorious body, Master, my progress has been smooth. I have already completed foundation establishment. And I have also formed a golden core." There was no pride in his voice, just a statement of fact. "With some additional refinement, by the time Lily reaches her threshold, I should already be preparing for the nascent soul stage." A brief pause. "In truth, I have already stepped into it." Michael did not respond immediately. Golden core. 1 step into nascent soul. Even for that world standards, that was fast. Too fast. But considering who Jester was and what he had access to, it made sense. However, was it that Jester was a freak, or his body was just that good? Michael didn't know, but he did not think too deep into it. "Jester, come. I have a task for you." Michael did not respond immediately. Golden core. 1 step into nascent soul. Even for that world standards, that was fast. Too fast. But considering who Jester was and what he had access to, it made sense. However, was it that Jester was a freak, or his body was just that good? Michael didn't know, but he did not think too deep into it. "Jester, come. I have a task for you." After receiving Michael's permission, Jester moved. There was no visible surge of power or grand display. He simply placed a hand over the man's head. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the man's body trembled faintly. His breathing stuttered, uneven and shallow. A low, almost inaudible sound escaped his throat before fading completely. Jester's eyes remained calm. Seconds passed. Then he withdrew his hand. The man remained still. His chest still rose and fell, but when Michael examined him, he already knew. The man was effectively dead. Not in the physical sense. But everything that had made him who he was had been stripped away entirely. Now he was simply a shell. Michael's gaze lingered on the body. He found himself wondering what to do with it now. As much as he was a necromancer, he had come to prefer working with actual corpses rather than people reduced to this state. After a brief moment, the damaged coffin of the Forgotten opened once more and Michael placed the body back inside. Another matter to be resolved later. For now it could wait. Michael shifted his attention back to Jester and waited quietly. Jester stood with his eyes closed, sorting through the memories he had just consumed. A minute passed before his eyes opened slowly. Michael spoke first. "What did you find?" Jester did not answer immediately. The information he had taken was vast, scattered, and layered with fragments that did not fit neatly together. He took a brief moment to arrange everything into something coherent before speaking. The chaos in the city was planned. Michael knew this much but did not interrupt. It is connected to the Federation's recent actions. Their attempt to bring ordinary civilians closer to the supernatural world has caused significant unrest among certain factions. The demonic faction in particular views this as a direct provocation. Their presence has been nearly non-existent in the public eye for a long time, yet they continue to be painted as a primary threat. Despite making no significant moves recently, they have been treated as pests and used for educational purposes. So they chose to respond. This was their way of stepping out into the public eye. It appears to be their usual method. Brightgate was simply one of several selected targets. Not the only one. Michael felt a wave of disgust rise within him. Meaningless. Destruction. Pointless casualties. All to make a statement. But before that feeling could settle, Jester spoke again. There is another factor. Michael's eyes narrowed. You. Silence filled the room for a brief moment. From the memories I accessed, there were plans to capture individuals close to you, which in this case would obviously be Aunt Mia and Lily. As Jester said this, his eyes went cold in their own quiet way. It was not anger exactly, not any strong emotion. To Jester, Lily was his master's property and his ongoing research subject. Had Michael known what Jester was actually thinking in that moment, he would have delivered a thorough lecture. But Michael's focus had already fixed entirely on the last words Jester had spoken. For a split second the air around Michael distorted. Mana surged, outward uncontrollably, pressing against the walls of the room. The temperature dropped and the pressure in the air became briefly suffocating. Then it stopped. Just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished. Michael exhaled slowly. His expression returned to something close to normal, but his eyes were cold. I see. Once again, the demonic supernaturals had pushed Michael further from any neutral stance toward them. At this point, they were branded in his mind as mortal enemies. If he ever found himself with sufficient power and a clear enough situation, he would not hesitate. Jester watched him quietly for a moment longer before continuing. There is more. Michael's gaze shifted back to him. The one whose memories I consumed was over 40 years old and had been part of the demonic faction for nearly 20 years. During that time, he gained access to several of their hideouts. Some were located in the wilds. Others were concealed inside cities. Michael's eyes sharpened. That piece of information alone carried significant weight. Before he could think further, Jester continued. Based on what I found, why don't we attack them? Michael did not answer immediately. His fingers tapped lightly against the arm of the chair as his mind worked through it. Attacking the hideouts made logical sense on the surface. The demonic faction had already made him and his family a target. They had acted first, so striking back was not without justification. But that same reasoning brought another problem to mind. If he moved against them now, there would be consequences. Not only from the demonic faction itself, but potentially from the Federation as well, depending on what he found, what he did, and how much attention he attracted in the process. Michael did not delude himself into thinking his situation with the Federation was resolved. He had seen enough to know how far they were willing to go for certain things. For all he knew, staying outside the academy too long would make him a target for kidnapping again, or making a visible mistake could give them exactly the leverage they needed. He had seen this kind of dynamic before, even back on Earth. Cases where the person who acted in response became the one blamed. Killing demonic supernaturals sounded righteous in principle, but if he struck first, it could be framed against him. The law, as that rank for demonic supernatural had once told him in hell, was often nothing more than a tool for those above. Still, the information itself was valuable. Even if he chose not to act directly, he could pass it along to the academy and let them determine what to do from there. Michael then asked whether the man had known of any treasure vaults belonging to the faction. He might not be tempted toward a kill streak just yet, but a treasure vault was an entirely different matter. For that, he was more than willing to get his hands dirty. Jester's expression did not change. No, he was an ordinary member. Useful but not significant. He knew hideouts, routes, signals, and some operational methods, but had no direct contact with the true core figures. No names worth noting. No access to their deeper structure. Michael's eyes dimmed slightly. For a brief moment he had hoped they had caught a thread leading somewhere larger. But it was not entirely surprising. If the man had been truly important, he likely would not have been so easy to capture. Michael temporarily set aside the matter of the demonic faction and was about to give Jester another task regarding the half-dead rank 4 demonic supernatural still waiting in the coffin when he heard footsteps. They were uneven. Both Michael and Jester turned toward the hallway at the same time. A moment later 2 figures appeared at the entrance to the living room. Lily and Aunt Mia. Both of them looked as though they had only just woken up. Their movements were slightly unsteady and their expressions carried the particular disorientation of someone emerging from sleep they had not chosen. For a brief second neither of them spoke as they took in the living room. There were 2 Michaels. Or at least that was what it appeared to be at first glance. Realization hit almost immediately after. Michael! Aunt Mia's voice came first, carrying both relief and disbelief in equal measure. The next moment she moved, her steps still slightly unsteady but not enough to slow her down. Michael stood just in time for her to reach him. She grabbed his arms, then his shoulders as if checking that what she was seeing was real. "You're back." There was a slight tremble in her voice, though she tried to conceal it. Michael could feel it clearly. The fear from when she lost consciousness had not fully passed. The relief now was real enough to cover most of it but not all. "I'm back," he said quietly. At the side, Lily had also moved, but unlike Aunt Mia she slowed before fully reaching him. Michael noticed it immediately. She was happy. That much was obvious. Her eyes had brightened the moment she recognized him, but there was restraint there as well. Strange and uncomfortable distance that she seemed unable to close entirely. Michael felt it the moment she stopped just a little short. For some reason that small gap made his chest tighten. Still, Lily looked at him and said softly, "You really came back." Michael felt there was far more contained in those words than what was spoken. Even he did not fully understand it yet, but somewhere along the way Lily had developed a trauma from what happened in Woodstone. When she saw those cracks opening above the city, the first person she had thought of was not her mother or any authority. It had been Michael. Seeing him now reminded her of who her cousin actually was. Thanks to the Federation, Lily was no longer as sheltered as she had been the year before. Michael nodded at her. "Of course I did." That seemed to help. The stiffness in her shoulders eased, though not completely. Aunt Mia had far less of that hesitation. Whatever distance existed in her was faint, almost negligible in comparison. To her, Michael was still Michael before anything else. Her hand remained on his arm as if she did not quite want to let go just yet. Michael looked between the 2 of them, then at Jester standing silently nearby. After so long, he was finally back home. The rest of the day passed in a blur. After everything that had happened, the quiet that came almost felt unreal. Conversations were short and scattered as everyone started to pay attention to the situation outside their immediate surroundings. Using the Supers Association, Michael managed to find out that many cities had been attacked this time, though a lesser number than during the attack on Woodstone City, but more absolute barriers were present, making the quality of this attack richer. Though most people did not speak their underlying thoughts directly, Michael could see what the demonic faction wanted to do and gritted his teeth. Total annihilation. Yes. For the cities that were barrier-trapped and had no way to come out, if it was exactly the same barrier that had enveloped Brightgate City, then there was only one conclusion. By the time help came, the whole city could have been dead. Fortunately, though the demonic faction was strong, the Federation together with other organizations were stronger. While Michael focused on the supernatural news, ordinary people used the means they had, which was mainly social media, and the terror they were met with was no less than what Michael saw on the Supers Association platform. In short, across all of Aurora, not just in Michael's country, there were traces of demonic panic and supernatural action. A lot had died. Michael had even overheard Lily on the phone saying that many of her classmates had almost died. Fortunately, thanks to his interference, there were not many casualties in the city, which would have been unavoidable even if Michael had acted early, something he wished he had done after. Finding out he was just paranoid about the possibility of something being stronger than him out there, a side effect that his common rank 4 status had instilled in him. Even if he had acted from the very start, it would have been fairly impossible, since he was still trapped outside when the cracks were on the verge of opening, and casualties would still have occurred, except perhaps if Michael had unleashed all his monsters the moment he crossed the gap and had not immediately focused on his family's whereabouts. By the time night fell, exhaustion had finally caught up with everyone. In Michael's home, one after the other, Lily and Aunt Mia retired to their rooms and fell asleep without much resistance. Only then did the house fall completely silent. Michael remained in the living room, seated alone. The calm stretched on for a while before a faint vibration broke it. Michael glanced down and found it was a message notification. His eyes narrowed slightly as he opened it. It was from the Academy. The contents were straightforward. The incident had been classified as a demonic faction attack. Despite the scale of the event, the city had successfully defended itself. Order was already being restored, and the situation was under control. The Academy then went on to state that all students, whether they had been inside or outside the Academy at the time, were required to return within 2 weeks. Except for special cases, failure to comply would result in consequences. Michael read through it once, then again more slowly. A small part of him relaxed. If the Academy was sending out a message like this, then it meant the situation had not spiraled beyond recovery. Millions of people lived in that city, and there was a possibility that most of them had likely survived. Though Michael was not naive enough to think there had been no losses. Even from the brief moment he had stayed back, he could tell the attack on the Academy side had been much stronger, especially those cracks in the sky. He had thought about what might have come out from them but hoped it wasn't the case. Michael's gaze lingered on the message a moment longer before shifting to the final lines. Various thoughts passed through his mind in quick succession. To Michael, the message gave him a feeling like the early signs of a storm gathering. After thinking about it for a while, he decided to contact an acquaintance about what could possibly be happening at the Academy, to calm his rising unease. In the whole Academy, Michael only had the contact of 2 people, both of whom he had interacted with to a certain degree. One was Rin, for obvious reasons, and the other was Michael's first acquaintance in the whole Academy, his direct upper-year senior, Lyra. He had started typing in the message bar but stopped and decided that calling was better. This way he would know whether communication was even possible, and if she did not answer, he would just text Rin, who he felt also had a greater chance of knowing more information. The call connected faster than Michael expected. For a brief second there was only silence on the other end. Then Lyra's voice came through bright, lively, and completely out of place, compared to everything that had been happening. "Wow, Michael calling me first? What is this?" she said, her tone full of teasing amusement. "Don't tell me you're getting married. You even took the initiative to contact me first." Several dry responses surfaced in Michael's mind immediately. He ignored all of them. "How are you?" he asked instead, his voice steady. "Are you in the Academy right now?" There was a slight pause, then a soft hum from Lyra. "I'm fine," she replied. "And yeah, I'm inside the Academy." Michael didn't say anything right away, but inwardly he had already drawn one conclusion. If she could joke like that, then the situation at the Academy wasn't at its worst. That alone eased a small part of the tension in his chest. Lyra continued without waiting for him to ask further. "If you're calling about what happened, it's already passed," she said. "The Academy took a hit, but the foundation wasn't damaged. So, overall, it's still stable." Michael listened quietly. Then Lyra's tone shifted. "We still lost people." Michael's expression darkened. "A few students," she added more quietly now. "Some instructors too. And one of the directors. The one who was in charge of protecting the ordinary population around the Academy. He was severely injured." Michael's grip tightened slightly around the device. His mood sank. So many casualties. He had expected losses, but hearing it like this weighed heavily. Instructors were at least rank 3 Awakeners. And even a director, someone at rank 4, had been pushed to that extent. Just how strong had the attack been? Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. Was it from the dimensional cracks? He asked. For some reason he felt like this much damage was too much to have been caused by monsters. Lyra answered immediately. No. It was the demonic supernaturals. Michael's brows tightened slightly. That bad? He muttered under his breath. It's not surprising, Lyra said. Not only did the Academy have to deal with monsters coming out of the dimensional cracks, some of them reaching rank 4, they also had to handle those troublesome demonic bastards at the same time. And they did it while being half-staffed. Michael understood what Lyra meant. The Academy was never fully gathered in one place. Instructors had assignments, directors had responsibilities beyond the Academy grounds. Some were always away handling external matters, and stronger or upper-year students were not always around. If he wasn't mistaken, even the dean and vice-dean were not around most of the time. Least since he had entered the Academy, they had never once appeared in the flesh, and even the dean who had wanted to see him months ago was nowhere to be found. All of this meant that when the attack happened, the Academy had not been at full strength, which should also have been the case for other similar organizations around. Michael leaned back slightly, his gaze lowering. A faint chill settled in his chest. His hatred for the demonic faction grew stronger with every passing moment. And yet, there was almost nothing he could do. Not at his current position. Michael closed his eyes briefly and forced himself to calm down. Letting emotions take control would not change anything. When he opened his eyes again, his expression had returned to normal. Right, he said quietly. That's not actually why I called. Lyra made a soft sound of acknowledgement on the other end. What is it then? Michael's gaze flickered slightly as he glanced at the message still open on his device. The Academy message, he said. The one about everyone returning. In 2 weeks. Do you know anything about it? There was a brief pause. When Lyra spoke again, her tone had changed slightly, still casual, but with a trace of hesitation beneath. I'm not sure, but I have a feeling the Academy might be preparing for something. She paused. It feels like they might be going to war soon. Before Michael could ask anything further, Lyra spoke again. I can't talk for long, she said. Things are still a bit busy here. Michael understood. All right. There was a brief pause. Take care, Lyra added. You too. The call ended. The line went silent. Michael lowered the device slowly, his gaze unfocused for a moment. War. The unease in his chest did not fade but only grew heavier. However, Michael's thoughts were cut short when he received another call. This time it was from someone unexpected. Mira. For this particular former classmate of his with a special class, Michael had a bit of an impression of her that made her memorable, but due to their limited contact they were also not close. Just former classmates. Michael picked up the call as there was no reason to refuse, especially in these sensitive times. He had also been preparing to text a few people, like Rin for example, to see if they were fine, so having one more person on the list wasn't difficult. As expected, the call went in the direction he thought it would. It was related to demonic supernaturals, the hottest topic in the world right now, except Mira had just happened to be lucky enough to be in a city the demonic faction had not selected for their chaos. As they were not particularly close, they had nothing else to talk about, leading to an awkward ending. Michael felt like Mira had more to say but for some reason gave up, and since his mind was not particularly settled and he was distracted, he did not press her. The moment Michael hung up the call, he turned to look at the space within the damaged coffin of the Forgotten. Surrounded by many humanoid corpses at varying distances was Jester, and beside him sat the ice-cold coffin Michael had created for the rank 4 demonic supernatural he had met on the first floor of Hell. After giving it some thought, Michael decided the greatest value the man held was in his memories and body. After Jester was done extracting them, Michael planned to turn the old man into an undead for an immediate boost in strength. While he was worried about the possibility of needing to go through 2,000 lightning tribulations when he evolved all his current legion to rank 4, there was no need for that if ready-made materials already existed. Because of this, Michael also planned to have the dead drake revived as an undead. Even if he failed in resurrecting one, he could still have one at the end of the day if the goddess of misfortune did not have his time, and if the goddess of fortune did, Michael hoped that by the time he was done with these two precious materials he would have 2 rank 4 undead, which would boost his overall strength. At this point Michael could tell the damaged coffin of the Forgotten had the power to block the heaven's gaze, which was why his lightning tribulation had not immediately started after he completed his mission, and how Lily, who should have started hers, was currently sheltered from it. Michael planned to release her in a few days after finding a good spot, and if she survived, that would be another rank 4 power in his legion. As for beginning, though he looked so close to a breakthrough, he could also be far. After rank 3, progress was not something that could be easily measured, but if in the coming days, weeks, or months beginning woke up and also survived his lightning tribulation after Michael released him from the coffin, that would be another rank 4 power in his legion. Thanks to beginning's special law as well, he could potentially become Michael's biggest trump card. There was also the issue of feedback when Lily and beginning advanced. Michael could tell that starting from rank 3, every major advancement was a huge power-up. He only had to look at how Director Lin could match him in physical strength despite being a mage. Though Michael was not one to talk, having felt the power of more than a few rank 4 entities, he could tell that Director Lin was not particularly strong. Maybe stronger than other rank 4 awakeners, he didn't know, but he felt almost sure she wasn't as strong as the old kidnappers from the academy, and definitely not as terrifying as Director Arvin. All these factors made Michael excited for his undead advancements. Even if the huge feedback might drop off after a few dozen advancements, as long as he himself did not advance rapidly in strength in a short time, the other hundreds of undead when put together would accumulate their feedback into something great. Michael didn't doubt this. It had happened at his lower ranks, so why would it stop at his higher ranks? Every improvement to his stats, even if only a dozen units, was still improvement. Anyone would kill for that sort of progress. Of course, his undead advancements aside, there was also something else that could strengthen him personally. Michael wasn't sure, as he had no one to test it with, but if he could engrave 20 rank 4 undead to himself, how strong would he be? Together with being able to fully use the abilities of his undead, plus the bonus stats and all, Michael couldn't help but imagine how powerful he would become. Engraving also didn't affect the chosen undead beyond changing their constitution. Many of Michael's undead were flesh monsters, or to put it plainly, zombies. As zombies they still had some flesh and blood characteristics, and normally in other flesh undead, even with these characteristics, it was obvious they were living dead. It was only thanks to multiple evolutions that Michael's undead differed from others, and as more evolutions happened, Michael could tell his talent was steering them towards the undying status, very similar to the legendary vampires who Michael knew actually existed in some realm, though he wasn't sure if they existed in Aurora. To be honest, after working so much with flesh undead, Michael wanted to branch towards more variants, like ghosts, creatures from the netherworld, undead skeletons, and so on. He even had a few materials stored, and when he had time in the future this would be part of his focus. Shifting back to his engraving after summoning Lucky back, though on the surface he still looked largely the same, his insides were dead. No organs or anything, just ash. For the trait of power he got, Michael didn't see this as a bad exchange. Lucky also didn't care if he had the thoughts to think that. Also, after summoning Lucky, Michael felt lighter, and a brief series of tests later showed that engraving was also linked to the constitutional strength of the host, as Michael could foresee himself growing heavier in weight in the future. Though this pointed toward more training, it didn't dampen Michael's spirits. Thinking of the possibility of pairing his law with certain forms, Michael turned to look at the huge dragon a certain distance away from him, and the thoughts that came to him made him even more excited. It took a bit of effort before he could calm himself down. Michael couldn't be blamed, after all. He was only just 19, and thoughts like transforming into a dragon were exciting. Even if one accounted for his past life, he had barely reached 22, and thanks to his illness much of his life had been taken away. Thoughts like this still made him very much excited.